I want to introduce Kim Zetter, who's going to do the Mr. Robot panel. Thank you.
Okay, it's good that we're at the end of the session, or at the end of the day here, in case we run off a little longer. Unfortunately, we don't have any clips for you. We wanted to put some of those together and maybe show you some of the hacks in progress as they were developed, but this kind of came together short notice, last minute, so we don't have that. But we do have a great panel of experts here who are going to answer all of your technical questions, except anything that involves a spoiler. I'm going to introduce the panel. I'll go through some questions, but we definitely want this to be interactive. We want all of you guys to feel free. I can give you sort of a signal when we're going to be getting ready to take audience questions, and we definitely want your questions. So you all know that we're in here for the Mr. Robot panel, right? Okay. Just want to make sure you're in the right place. Okay, so I was talking with Core. I don't know if I need to give you like a summary of the show, right? You all know the show, right? Okay, great. All right, so I'm just going to introduce the panelists then, and you guys aren't in the order that I thought you were going to be in, so, well, Core is in the center, so why don't we start with Core. So we've got Core Adana in the blue checked shirt there. Core is a writer and tech producer of Mr. Robot. But he actually comes from our community. He worked as a network security analyst and forensic manager for Toyota Motor Sales, where he did pen testing, designed security policies, did forensics for the legal and HR departments. That is until he got his big break in Hollywood in 2013 as a production intern initially, and then 2 years later, he scored his job with the Mr. Robot team. And I'm going to ask him a little bit about how he got there. In addition to writing scripts, he oversees all technical aspects of the show, so that's not just about putting the hacks together, but he makes sure that the hardware that's being used is correct, that the set direction is accurate, and all of that as well. Core put together a core team of consultants, security experts, to assist him with that, and that's who we've got here. So I guess I'll start on the far right there and come forward to me. Now I've got to switch gears here. So we've got at the far right there is Andre McGregor. He's director of security for Tanium, managing their internal security, but he's a former FBI agent. And so he assists in all of the FBI forensic stuff on the show. And unlike many feds, he actually has a computer engineering background and knows some of this stuff. So prior to joining the Bureau, he worked as an engineer at Goldman Sachs and was IT director for Cardinal Health Advocate. In his work with the Bureau, he helped establish the first cyber national security squad for FBI's New York field office and led numerous large-scale cyber investigations involving everything from financial crime to critical infrastructure intrusions. Next, do I need to intro Jeff? Jeff Moss, everyone knows him. Dark Tangent, of course, founder and director of Black Hat, more importantly of DEF CON, which began in 1993. Former Phreaker, is now a widely recognized computer security expert who in 2009 was appointed to the Homeland Security Advisory Council to provide advice and recommendations to the Secretary on matters related to Homeland Security. And from 2011 to 2013, he served as ICANN's Chief Security Officer. You all know Jeff. Next to Core is Ryan, Kazantsian, did I get it right? Okay. Chief Security Architect for Tanium and has 13 years of experience in incident response and forensics, pen testing, and security architecture. Prior to joining Tanium, is that Tanium or Tanium? Tanium, sorry. He was a technical director and lead investigator for Mandiant, where he worked with dozens of Fortune 500 organizations involved in targeted attacks, although I assume that eCorp wasn't one of them. He also helped train FBI agents. And finally, you guys all know CJ. This is Mark Rogers, who all you know is CJ Junkie, is an old school hacker who heads information security at Cloudflare and is a longtime goon here at DEF CON. Mark's obviously well known for pioneering some hacks in the 90s, and last year he gave that fantastic presentation on hacking a Tesla. So I'm going to start with some overview questions, primarily initially directed at Core. I want everyone to jump in with any questions that you feel are relevant to you. But just to get us started on sort of the overview, I want to, Core, just give us an idea of how exactly the show came together with Sam.
Really quickly, before I get into that,
Yeah.
I do want to say that there are two members. Can you guys hear me now? All right. Really quickly, before I get into that, I just want to say that there are two members of the consulting team who couldn't be with us here today, Michael Bazell and James Pluff. And Michael, if you're here, put your hand up, because I think he's supposed to be here. If not. All right. Inspiration for the show. Our creator and showrunner, Sam Esmail, he is Egyptian, and he has relatives who are living in Egypt who experienced the Arab Spring, and just dealing with that and knowing how a younger generation was able to use technology in a way to thwart internet censorship and get the access that they needed using technology or social media was a huge inspiration for Mr. Robot. That, coupled with the fact that Sam and I believe many people in this room share this disdain for how Hollywood has portrayed technology and hacking in film and television up to this point. And upon my first meeting with him, that's like the first thing that we bonded over was how much we hated that and how we would cringe every time we'd see a show about hacking or a movie about hacking. So we wanted to do it right, and we thought that doing it in a realistic way would be dramatic and would be enticing and compelling. And that really empowered me to just, and I got into a lot of fights and altercations since that moment, and I still continue to do so, even with these guys. But it's all in the name of making it authentic and making it realistic, and hopefully we're doing a good job of that, and hopefully we continue to do a good job of that. So those are the two main inspirations for the show.
So how did Sam get the characterization of Elliot Alderson so spot on? Because it's not just the hacks that Hollywood gets wrong, it gets wrong the hackers and the culture in the community.
So Sam dabbled a bit in hacking as a teenager, but by no means does he refer to himself as a hacker these days. But it's interesting, having been exposed to both worlds, writing and just the tech community and the hacking community, I see that just the isolation, the stress, the anxiety, the social awkwardness, the amount of time spent alone in front of a computer problem solving, how frustrated I used to get when I tried to code and I tried to solve problems and I couldn't figure it out is very similar to the stresses that I experienced breaking story or trying to nail a scene or writing one of these scripts. So I think just the comparison between a hacker and a writer from a anxiety perspective is very, very similar. And the drug usage, the social awkwardness, all of this, I think Sam just infused his experience as a writer and put it into this hacker character. And it works because of those worlds are very similar. And I've been able to make those connections of how similar those two worlds are. And of course, you're using different parts of your brain. But still, I think a lot of that isolation and loneliness is rampant in both worlds. So I think that's why it works, and I think that's why so many people in this community can relate to Elliot, because it's hard dealing with people. I mean, I think that's one of the great things about DEF CON is you guys all get together and actually, connect with each other in real life. So it's great.
But he also gets, I mean, the other hackers that we see in shows are sort of, let's say Black Hat, let's just call it out, where they're all powerful and they're not human, essentially. And Elliot is very human and vulnerable and basically psychologically messed up and a lot of things, mentally unstable. And those elements all exist in this community. We have, suicides in the community and a lot of stuff like that. And he gets that. And that was unusual, I felt like so.
And again, I think that's prevalent even in the writing community as well. It's another similarity that just it's the engine that makes the show work. And I think the character vulnerability and him dealing with his demons in that way is what draws you to him and makes him relatable. He's not a superhero. He's terribly flawed, but he has good intentions and he wants to change the world for the better, even if by doing so he ends up destroying the world. It's compelling that way.
Yeah, you can face them, and I think that's the problem is when you turn to me, they can't hear you. I wanted to ask about forming this group of consultants, because the first season, the first show, the pilot, Sam had done without you.
Without me, yep.
And then after the pilot, after it got picked up, you came on board. But you only had one consultant at that time for the first year, correct?
Yeah, it was me and Michael Bazell working on that first season. And the role didn't really exist. I kind of just fell into it. I was working for Sam. I was in the room. I was pitching ideas. And he knew that I had a cybersecurity background, so he knew that I could help in that way. So I remember looking at the original Bible for season 1, and the Evil Corp hack that he had planned out was very fantastical and kind of crazy. And I said, well, if we want to ground this in reality, this is how I would do it, and this is where your data targets would be, and these would be the different methods of taking them down. And from that, we kind of explored the attacking the offsite tape backups and a redundant data center in China for disaster recovery or redundancy. So we kind of formed the network infrastructure for Evil Corp early on, and that kind of dictated our trajectory for the season 1, the big hack of season 1. And it was me and Michael Bazell coming up with a lot of those ideas and incorporating them into the show. And I was lucky enough to form an even bigger team for season 2, which is awesome.
So why don't you walk us through, I just want to get to the hacking, obviously. So a lot of the hacking appears to be grabbed straight from the headlines. This is, straight from the headlines and also from Black Hat and DEF CON. Let's just admit you're cribbing from us, right?
I totally am.
So the prison hack was DEF CON 2011 talk?
DEF CON 19, I believe.
Teague Newman,
Rad.
Tiffany Rad.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's a white paper and there's a great demo I found on YouTube that I studied, and that was the inspiration for that last hack in that show. So definitely ripping you guys off, 100%.
So
now I got one of you guys on my team, which is great.
So you've had the no car hacking yet though. Ransomware, the IoT hacking, obviously. Latest episode, we've got the hacking Android phones with a rogue femtocell, and also the affiliate link hack that Darlene does to get free food. So explain to us, what is the process for coming up with the hacks? Do you have a hack idea first, and then it gets written into the plot? Is the plot written first, and then you come up with a hack that suits the plot? And then how do you guys work together?
Great. So the story ideas come first, and story will always come first. We will always act in the best interest of the story. So I'm in the room every day with a group of other very talented writers, pitching story ideas, trying to nail down the structure and the arcs for the season. And in those, there are breaks in those discussions where Sam will say, all right, here we need to have a hack. We don't know what it's going to be, but Elliot's going to hack, and he's going to be at this point in the story after we're done. So after that, I'll reach out to my team, these guys, and we'll have a brainstorming session. And I'll say, we need to work within the confines of this story point, and we need to get Elliot from point A to point B, and what is available to us, and what's realistic and what makes sense, and what's efficient, what's smart, and what would be cool to see visually on screen. So it's weird that we kind of have two different writers' rooms working in tandem. We have the story writers' room, and then we have our technical writers' room, where we throw out ideas, argue with each other, try and find the best option. And then once we finalize an idea together, I bring it back to the room, and it gets incorporated into the script. And at that point, it's like really short general description, maybe a couplet in one of the scripts that just describes the hack, big picture. Once we get to production, that's where the nitty-gritty detail work starts, because we actually have to pull off the hack. So I need to work with the props department to make sure the hardware looks completely accurate, and they've never heard of a Raspberry Pi before. So I have to tell them exactly, like, here's where you can buy one. Here's the model we need. I have to work with set dressing to make sure that we don't have a ridiculous amount of Cat 5 cable all over the arcade when there are only like 5 workstations there. I have to work really closely with an animator and these guys to nail exactly what the screen content looks like. So oftentimes, one of these guys will do the hack for real and will send me screenshots or video of it, and then I have to take it to a Flash animator, and we build out an interactive animation based on what these guys did. And it's something that we can put in front of Rami or Christian, and they don't even have to think about it. They can hit the wrong keystrokes, and the right characters will show up on screen, and the screen will behave the right way we need it to. And we shoot all of these sequences practically. Sam hates using green screen. I hate using green screen, so we don't burn it in after the fact. And even that process, like these guys will tell you how many times I've called them up at 4 in the morning saying, we need to fix this and it needs to be ready by 9 a.m. And then I have to work with an animator and go through like 15, 20 revisions to make sure that there are no typos and make sure that everything's working properly for him to rebuild this terminal sequence or whatever screens we're seeing. And then I have to work with the actors to try and get it right, and then I work with a completely separate insert unit, a small splinter crew, to shoot all the close-ups and the inserts that we cut to in building out these sequences. So we're filming raked shots of hands on a keyboard, and I have to make sure that they're hitting Alt-Tab when they need to toggle windows at the right time. Like little things that you don't think about and that no one in production and no one in Hollywood really cares about, but on this show is a big deal to us. And we want to nail those details. And luckily, you guys are picking up on those details, which I'm really happy about.
I will have to say that I've worked some of the largest breaches in the U.S. history, and working for Core is worse than all of those. Because at least when I would go home from the FBI, I was at home. Core would still call me at 3 o'clock in the morning and say, I need an output. I need you to take a video of exactly what the output Elliot would be doing, and then send it to me in the next hour because we're doing the animation. But what was cool is if you've noticed that there's some Easter eggs that are there, so you get to add that. When it doesn't work, we have to work through it, for several hours or change the hack. I mean, there's multiple times which we unfortunately will not go through all of them, but we had a hack in place and it was in the script and everything was ready to go, and then all of a sudden it was that's not going to work. Actually, when we tried to do the hack, it did not work.
Can you elaborate on that? Can you tell us what the hack was and what didn't work?
No, because we may actually use it again, but but I'll allude to the fact that the first episode was not the hack that you saw was not the original hack.
Yeah, he's referring to the ransomware attack on Bank of V in the first episode of season 2.
Can you guys hear everyone?
But even then, you have to think.
Pick up the mics and hold them in your hand. Yeah.
But even then, it goes beyond just the hack. Specifically with that particular episode, it was the set design and what we would need to be able to, have a bank and the systems that we would need and the type of personnel that would have access to the systems that we would want and how we would portray that on the show to make it realistic for people to say, yes, someone with that skill set or someone with that job role would have access to that system. And if I plugged in a device or if I, accessed, a specific system, it could pivot to the next system and then have a cascading effect. That's the level of detail that we're going in because I know that you guys are looking at the same thing, and we don't want it to make CSI Cyber where it's green code is good and red code is malware. You guys all saw that? Yeah.
It's also really surprising how disproportionate the amount of work that goes into some of these things. If you look at even look at some of the really smallest things, like the affiliate links hack is only a couple of seconds of screen time.
Yeah, and it's just dialogue.
Yeah, that was days of discussion because the original script, the hack that was laid out there, we hated it. We wanted to shape it into something that would really work. And so it went round and round, and we reshaped it into something which ultimately people are dissecting it and writing entire articles on those few seconds. That's when we know we got it right.
What was it originally that you rejected?
You can go into it.
Are you guys familiar with what he's talking about, the affiliate hack? Why don't you describe it?
So the affiliate link hack was basically
Mike.
Darlene's getting free food by using affiliate links that belong to her boyfriend so that she gets credited for whatever clicks that he should have been credited for. The original hack involved DNS cache poisoning and this massively elaborate system. And I looked at it and went, that's not realistic, right? There's no way you would expend that level of effort for something as simple as that when there are so many other elegant, simple ways in which you can do it. And we bounced around the team and came up with multiple different options. And the one we went with in the end was actually we would target a specific piece of infrastructure in a telco, the proxy APN, and by compromising that, anything that goes through that APN gets rewritten into whatever we want. And the net result is a realistic hack that could be pulled off in the real world and could have real world implications. And That's the kind of hack that I want to put myself behind.
So this was a hack involving the Postmates website.
This is the Postmates
Postmates.com.
APN, yeah.
When anytime anyone would order food, Darlene would get a free $10 coupon for food. Anyone would order a food delivery, she would suddenly get a $10 coupon for free food.
And something else that I should just note, the script, if we have an issue with the hack, the script changes. I go to Sam or I go to the other writers and I say, we need to find another way around this. And it's interesting because I think the most common argument that I had in the room, especially in season 2, was Sam would want, a big hack that's intricate and complicated, and it'll fill this page for, to turn the scene to get Elliot to this next point in the story. And then when we talked about it, we'd be like, all right, it's pretty simple, and it's actually smarter and more efficient if we have him do this, but it's not as sexy on screen. So if I throw that idea out, Sam's like, well, that sucks. I don't want to do that. That's boring. So we have to strike that balance of what is visually compelling, what will move the story forward, and still meet the expectations of the tech crowd that's analyzing, the technology being used and the motivations for the hack and the tactics that are being used.
Yeah, and for me, it's almost like being in a virtual penetration test where, if you've ever done pen testing or red teaming work, you always end up in this situation where you're a couple of days in and nothing you've tried has worked and you're kind of stuck and you have, a set of things you do have access to and a set of goals, and you've got to figure out how to cross that chasm and get from point A to B. And a lot of times the story is exactly that. Cora will come to us and say, so here's the context, here's what needs to come out of it, and it's awesome that if that requires adjustment in dialogue or tweaks to the scene to make it real, they're totally willing to do that. The second part of it that's fun is, my initial reaction to a lot of these that I worked with Cora on was, wow, how are we going to make this technically accurate? And it's that same sort of conundrum. And so you sit and brainstorm the way you do when you're actually in a real-world pen test and think, well, if I did this and then this and then this, that actually could kind of get the characters there. And then it's all about, let's do it on screen. Let's try to use some real tools. Let's use Kali Linux. Let's simulate as much of it as possible, and then streamline it down to what can maybe fit in a couple seconds of screen time here or there.
I want to come back to the. Oh, do you want to?
I was just going to say what is on the other side of that. What's very hard is, if you haven't caught up, you know that the FBI is about to be hacked. Having to walk through the technical accuracy of hacking the FBI without disclosing state secrets and having
I was
national
gonna get to
security
that, yes.
implications, and being able to do it in such a way where you're able to gain access to the information that will obviously advance F society, but not reveal anything that I don't want anyone in this room to be able to also leverage. So.
The recipe to hack the
Yeah,
FBI.
we must have had, I don't know how many hours we've discussed FBI infrastructure and how to hack the FBI, but a lot of work went into it.
I know so much about hacking the FBI now.
And the
Next year's
FBI
talk.
knows that you know that.
Hey, I want to come back to the hacking, but I wanted to jump to OPSEC for a second here. Jeff wrote a great article for Playboy in which you pointed out some of the OPSEC issues with the hacking group, the mobile phones and all that.
It's tough because I love the show. And so I don't want to be that guy on the side of the road. I'm picking off, well, they forgot a comma. No, they didn't. Don't be that guy. Yeah. Well, but you tell a story about how Sam sits there and, like, at the moment somebody online says something negative about the show, it's like Sam calls you. It's like, did we get that right? Because he's so obsessed. And so it's tough because I want to provide criticism or an insight, but I don't obviously want to tell you your job. And so that's why in my last article I was talking about surveillance operations, and I was trying to guess, like, well, is she being followed? Or are you trying to show that Darlene is freaking out? Is she seeing ghosts, where there aren't any? So I just had to assume, no, she's really probably being followed because there's some dark army action going on. There's some FBI action. So let's just pretend she's being followed. What did she just do wrong, and what did the followers do wrong? Like, you would never reveal yourself as a follower unless you were trying to send a message to the person you were following. And you'd only do that if you want them to change their behavior or spook them, and then see what their reaction is, see how they behave. Like, you reveal that you're following them, and you see, can you force an error? And what does that error reveal, right? You see this in TV all the time. And so I've been having a lot of fun with it because I'm tying it back to other books, and I'm trying to think of other movies, so I'm trying to draw a broader picture. But so far, you've been getting almost everything right, which is pretty cool. Surveillance is really, really hard to do, and at some point, you're going to have to start criticizing by saying, well, how do these people who have never done this before professionally, they don't have professional training, you don't learn how to do like tag team surveillance, counter surveillance, unless you actually do it. So at some point, I'm waiting for them to put on VR goggles and say, no, wait, I'm practicing my counter surveillance runs. And so we're just assuming that they have all the skill and all this knowledge. And so at some point, I'm waiting for the backstory of like, how do they learn all of this stuff?
If we ever do that, or if we ever drop a Cat5 cable out of an airplane into a car underneath it, I want you to all kill me.
There is something else that I do want to touch on, echoing what Ryan was saying about using real tools.
Yes,
Can I bring this up?
yes.
Can I talk about this?
Let's just introduce this for a second here, because one of the things that we've all seen in Mr. Robot is that they're actually using the true tools. We've seen Dave Kennedy's set tool and everything else, and Core is very adamant about making sure not just that the hacks are correct, but that the tools are correct, but he gets a lot of grief for it. So why don't you talk about it?
So it is a ongoing struggle between me and the legal department at NBC Universal in an effort to clear real tools on a hacking show, and especially using the tools in a way where maybe they're helping a hack, or they're associated with a hack, connected to a hack in some way, or something. There's some negative connection, and unfortunately, our roles are just, that's the nature of the beast. We're pitted against each other because they want to minimize legal risk, and I want to make the most authentic show that I can. So it is very difficult for me to convince our clearance department to reach out to companies and to ask permission to use the tool. It's very, very hard. I've had so many conversations, very contentious conversations around that very topic. So it is easier, and actually we've taken risks, and I've had Mark reach out to members of the community, I've reached out to members of the community, and we got some great feedback, and luckily these people were fans of the show, so we were able to incorporate that software, that piece of hardware in the show. But it's much easier for me if you guys reach out to me directly. If you guys reach out and say, hey, I want to showcase my tool or this piece of software in the show, I want to hear about it. And I know I've read some articles recently about product placement and integration, and that's all bullshit. Like, this show, a theme of this show is consumerism and consumer culture. And from day one, Sam and I we've always talked about wanting to use as many brands as possible, wanting to showcase as many brands as possible, and just really explore the world of Evil Corp and businesses and how they operate. So it helps us. It helps us ground the show in reality if we can use real software. So if you guys want your tool showcased in the show, let me know, because it's much easier if you express interest first instead of me having to convince a conglomerate to reach out to you.
You actually used a real company with a DDoS. It was Prolexic in the first season.
Yeah, definitely. We used a lot of real companies in the first season, and it's just there are these instances where we do kind of a knockoff where it looks like a specific tool, but we can't make it look exactly like it, and I just want to stay away from that. I would much rather use real tools, real solutions. So.
Mark, you had said that when you're doing the real simulations of the hacks and you're going through the steps, you talked about actually consulting with outside experts in some cases with different expertise to figure out reactions, kinetic reactions and things like that. You want to talk about that a second?
Yeah, and it's not just me. I think everyone in the team has reached out. There are a couple of, can I go into detail
on the thing at the Can I go into details about the thing at the place at the time?
So, the problem is I'd love to talk about all of this stuff, but we can't because we don't want to give away spoilers that will damage the story or spoil any of the illusion that's coming on. But let's just say there are a number of things that happen in different parts of the show, and if we have any doubts about the realism, or if we have any concerns about the physics involved or the science behind it, we will reach out to experts, professors in some cases, and talk to them and say, look, in this hypothetical situation, which I can't tell you about, and I can't tell you why, would this work? Is this realistic? How would you expect this to happen? Is there any advice you can give us about what to expect? And we take that on board and we use that to shape what we do and ultimately the production team uses that to shape everything that goes on from that point.
And we do that with everything, by the way. It's not just from an IT perspective or a scientific perspective. Even from an economics perspective or a psychology perspective, we seek out experts in those fields to make sure that we are nailing the accuracy of what would a post 5.9 world look like. What would Elliot, how would Elliot react to certain situations, dealing with these delusions and these inner demons. So it's something that we always want to reach out to experts in those fields.
So what are your favorite hacks so far in the show, each of you? Doesn't have to be one that you worked on, or it could be, or Jeff, do you have a favorite that you've seen?
Well, the one that kind of hooked me, finally I was all in on the show, was when I started seeing hacks fail. Because normally the hack always works just at the right time, and I think it was toward the end of season 1 when they were dropping USB keys and the keys didn't work, and then the police department antivirus or something caught something, and all of that stuff made me think, okay, great, now are they going to problem solve? How are they going to get around that? And the failure of the hack was actually more impressive to me than the success of the hack.
The first thing that hooked me was actually really simple. It was when Elliot's in season 1 guessing people's passwords. The fact that it wasn't like in conventional TV depictions where it's just guessing something super obvious like password 1. It was combinations of password patterns that people often use, like last 2 digits of the year they're born with a really common password phrase. And if you ever done password cracking or looked at the statistical analysis of most common password patterns and dumps, you see exactly that. So his whole mindset about figuring out passwords for his different targets and how realistically that was portrayed really made me realize, like, wow, they're actually thinking about this in a realistic manner.
For me, season 2, episode 1, where you had the booby-trapped computer that lit on fire.
The thermite.
I've been in so many situations where I've watched my peers not really do the proper chain of custody and evidence collection for an incident response, and it's very accurate when you're the local state police departments that are still trying to figure out how to deal with computers and how to deal with digital evidence, and it was just very accurate, and I think you'll see that as the season grows, that there's more of an FBI presence and how the FBI would deal with incident response and a data breach, but that was a pretty cool hack.
This is always a hard question for me because I'm really torn because I love a lot of the hacks that we did in season 1 and that we're doing in season 2. But if I had to choose one, it would probably be episode 5 when Mobley uses Set to spoof a text message to one of the workers to create a diversion.
This was in the data center where they had to get, Elliot was trying to deposit the Raspberry Pi.
Correct.
Needed to get a worker, and he spoofs.
Actually, my favorite might be the Raspberry Pi. I take it back.
I love it in that same episode when they edit the Wikipedia page to give Elliot's cover identity some background. Yeah, the amazing part of that is I'm seeing that scene for the first time and I'm thinking, well, that's not realistic because, like, if that's a high-profile person, his Wikipedia page isn't going to just be editable by everyone. But no, then the dialogue in the show, like one scene later, sets credibility for him having spent all those years building up reputation so that he could edit those Wikipedia pages.
Yeah. And then I remember watching that scene and I was thinking, uh-oh, Elliot didn't put on any gloves. His fingerprints are all over that Raspberry Pi. Yeah.
Mark, did you have a favorite?
I have to say, I loved all of them. For me, the biggest thing was I watched the whole of season 1, and I didn't throw anything at the TV.
You had said when we talked that your goal in going into season 2 was actually to make the hacks more elaborate than season 1. And you were also concerned that hacking can become very repetitive. Because hackers tend to, when they find something successful, they tend to repeat it over and over and over again. So how are you going to, this show could go on for 5 years. Like, how are you going to get over that issue of repetition?
I think the way they're doing it is by widening the team and bringing on new minds with new ideas. And it is tough because, like, in the real world, as a hacker, you'll have certain things that you do really well, and you'll keep using them because if they're successful, why change them? But that doesn't make for great TV because, okay, so he's going to throw the USB sticks down again. Yay. Much better if we can come up with some more interesting things. And by bringing in new characters and by bringing in new experts, it widens the palette.
Yeah, I've been fortunate to work with a lot of people in different disciplines in InfoSec, and one of the things that was fun for me was in working in a few of the really elaborate hacks that are to come later this season was trying to draw on a few different disciplines that haven't previously been shown in the preceding hacks. And so, you think about all the different fields, reverse engineering, application layer exploits, and, we're just starting to scratch the surface, I think, of the types of hacks that you can see, the types of devices that are targeted, the techniques that people are using. So, yeah, hacking can get repetitive, but I think there's still this just whole world of different interesting things we can show that are both realistic to the situation and also for people who are pausing the screen and tweeting screenshots has some good stuff to dig into.
I just want to let you know if you guys have questions, you can start lining up.
And
Feel
just
free.
so you guys know, that's like a primary problem that we discuss internally. This group up here, we're constantly talking about these ideas about what would be the most efficient hack to use for this situation. And then someone will throw out an idea, and I'll have to say, no, we did that in episode 3 of season 1, so we can't do that again. We have to think of something else that still makes sense. So we have to justify why we're not doing that again and why we're doing this new tactic and why that makes sense for this episode.
So what mistakes have you made? Oh, sorry, go
I
ahead,
was
Jeff.
just saying, if you do want to line up for questions, the microphone's just right here in the middle.
Yeah. What mistakes have you made? Because Jeff brought up the fact that Sam is basically, and you are on Reddit and Twitter. You're not watching the shows when they air, but you're actually watching the reactions to the show. And when people do point out mistakes, he makes sure that you know about them. So, yeah.
There were, in season 1, there were some screens that had typos, and there were things that just slipped through the cracks of just, at some point, if you do a screen capture on one of the PDFs, and you see it in episode 4, I think, there was a lot of just gibberish, and that was because of the animator who was working on it just ran, didn't fall asleep, but just kind of ran the text that I gave him through like this randomizer and just put that into it because there was a clearance issue, and it just slipped through. So I fixed it for the second time we saw it in episode 6 or 7, I believe. But then I think on Elliot's drug report in episode 3, marijuana is spelled incorrectly, like things like that. I got an email from Sam saying, "Why did this happen? Why are we making stupid mistakes like this?"
You also had a phone in airplane mode or something.
We did have a phone in airplane mode. We had Gideon's phone in airplane mode. So it's interesting because now I know who we're dealing with, and we haven't had many instances of that in season 2 because I'm kind of a Nazi when it comes to these screens. And if there is a mistake or a typo, I work with post-production to fix it before it airs. So hopefully this kind of thing doesn't happen. But again, I'm sure something is going to slip through the cracks again because we have people devoted to screenshotting this and then posting it on social media and then making my job and my life much harder. Thank you.
Let's take a question. Go ahead. You?
Andre?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you were involved in season 1. You worked at Goldman Sachs, and given like the culture of the show and like the messages behind it, why and when you left Goldman Sachs, and if that had any like your bearings on like how realistic it is to have someone on the inside at a big bank.
So I didn't work season 1, but it's an interesting question because Goldman Sachs has a very sharp culture, is what I will say, when it comes to technology and when it comes to security. And being an engineer in that space in the financial sector in New York, and then being an agent investigating intrusions for the financial sector in New York really had a lot of barriers for sort of innovation and imagination that you might get in Silicon Valley, where I am now. And so I think that culture that you see in season 1 is at E Corp is almost identical to my experiences when I was at Goldman Sachs when I just graduated college, and I could see that exact world today. And I've seen it in other situations, but I think you're right. Goldman Sachs, I think, is probably the sharpest of the ones that are there.
Any other question? Have to? Thank you.
how did the decision come through in the writing group to...
Can't hear you.
How did the decision in the writing group come to have Elliot break the fourth wall so often and so frequently, to turn to face the audience, us, and have that active dialogue? I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah. Did everyone hear the question?
So the question was, how did we come up with the idea to have Elliot break the fourth wall and actually address us as his friend? And I have to give all the credit to Sam on that, because he wrote that into the pilot before we ever formed a writer's room. And if you read even the early drafts of that pilot, when it was a feature, it opened with "Hello, friend," and him speaking to us. And it's weird because it really draws you in. And when I read it and when I saw the pilot, it really, I bought into this connection that I had with this character who was addressing me in this way that, I've never seen a show do that before in that way. And the ways in which he's vulnerable with us, in the ways in which he blames us for certain things, and now he's upset with us, doesn't really trust us. It's fascinating, and we talk about that in the room, and it's weird. We treat the viewer, we treat friend as a character in the room when we're breaking the story and when we're talking about it, and it's something we really take into account with everything. So that's all Sam. No, it's true. I haven't seen many movies or shows that do that in that way.
Hi, I think this is an incredibly groundbreaking show. It's amazing. I work in consumer education.
Come a little closer to the mic.
Sorry, I work in consumer education, and I understand the importance of how it is for us to see that this hacking is right. But what is your team hoping for the normal person to get out of the show? Are you trying to educate people more on the threats that are out there, or is it just edutainment?
Well, anyone feel free to jump in when I go through this, but we live in an age where we are more and more dependent on our devices and our technology, and there are a lot of people, even in the younger generation, who know how to use these apps, know how to use their smartphones, but they don't know the ways in which they're vulnerable. And if the show can shine a light on that and make them think about, like, oh shit, if I leave my phone, unlocked, this is how long it takes for someone to root it and install a piece of malware. I think that's great. If it increases that level of paranoia and awareness, I think that's a very good thing.
Yeah, I think for me, it's unavoidable now to, no matter what walk of life you're from, to just stay isolated from the hacks that make the news every week. That's great from an awareness perspective, but it also has a numbing effect. And what I love is for that and for the show to really have consumers expect more of the companies that are building the software they use and depend upon, that they trust to keep their data private. Because the reality is, if they're not putting that pressure, then organizations are always going to take shortcuts, and we're going to keep dealing with poorly developed services, poorly designed software, corners cut, and we all have seen the effects of that. So I love getting that awareness up. I love getting people thinking and caring and changing their behaviors based on that.
You know what? It's just refreshing for my mother to know what I've been working on for so many years in life. And I say it honestly because, we spend so many years trying to educate the public, and it's not working, right? I mean, finally, I opened up CNN this morning and I noticed that 7 of the various conversations and presentations at Black Hat were on the cover of CNN. I mean, 2-3 years ago, that was not the case. I mean, we're getting to a point where people are starting to understand technology, and we're getting to the point now where, hopefully we get the education in before people have the personal pain that I think we experience with hacks like Sony and hacks like what we're seeing with the campaigns and the iCloud photo hacks. We're waiting for that big cyber 9/11 moment, which hopefully never happens, but I think we're all expecting it to happen. And if we can get to a point where the public understands that password 123 is not good, and the point where we should have a little bit more understanding of our security, and we do it through a show that's fun, that's a win on my part.
For me, I've been doing DEF CON for 18 years, and for 18 years I've watched TV shows portray my community like a bunch of weirdos, like a bunch of idiots who don't know anything about computers, who have portrayed hacks as these mystical things that happen when you connect magical devices to cars and suddenly remote control them. And I'm sick of it. I want to see real stuff on TV that doesn't make me rage. And I want to see accurate portrayals of people in my community, people I can relate to. And so being able to do this and be part of this, for me, was a gift.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, Mark, because I always remember this story. Have you ever seen Die Hard 4, Live Free or Die Hard, where the FBI Cyber Division's kind of focus? Well, I always remember the producer, the director came to the FBI headquarters and wanted to see what Cyber Division was like. And then as they got a tour, they were very disappointed because it looks like a 1960s middle school. And, you know, as agents, we would watch the movie and we're like, man, I wish we had all this technology.
It's like Enemy of the State.
Right. You wish you had that. And so, you know, we show something that's you know, fabulous on television, like the Bourne Identity type of movies, when in fact none of that exists. And so now we have a show that we're sort of able to slowly work through the technical advances that we have today. And ideally, like I said this in an interview, I want every member of Congress to have watched Mr. Robot, to have said, oh wow, this is possible, because we need to have everyone that is in a decision-making ability in government to know that everything that we have is vulnerable from a cybersecurity perspective.
Okay, so you'd mentioned you have to run things by NBC Universal's legal team. I just want to know how it went when you decided it was okay for Elliot to go pirate a movie with uTorrent and have all the scene release groups tagged on it. Can you elaborate on that at all?
There are a lot of fun Easter eggs that are hidden in the show, and that's one of them. And luckily, that wasn't a discussion. So,
but now it will be.
Now it will be. Thank you for bringing attention to it.
Seriously, you never cleared that.
I mean, we cleared uTorrent. I looked into some other tools instead. I didn't actually, you know, uTorrent was the only tool that cleared, and I will always go with a tool that clears as opposed to ripping off another one or you know, reimagining a design. So I can speak to that. For the pirate groups, I don't know what you're talking about.
I noticed on that screen too that Elliot is a pretty bad leecher. He like lets up he shares very little, but he takes quite a lot. Yeah.
I don't know where he got that tactic from either. Just, it's weird.
So I heard you say that the screens are recreated with Flash, and that's kind of interesting because most of them are just text-based screens, and you could either just, like for example, there's a Python script in the last episode I watched. Why don't you just write it in Python to create a mock-up of what it's doing? Or even, rather than that, just have a server that is literally being, you know, your own, you know, test server that you're literally hacking. So we're actually seeing what's happening rather than doing it in Flash. What's the idea behind using Flash?
So we've explored a lot of these options, and unfortunately, since we're the first, I believe we're the first show to even bring this much effort toward this level of authenticity, it's only me on set. It's only me and a video animator, video engineer. So the way to utilize the crew's time, you know, the actors' time, the best way to do it in the most time-efficient way of doing it at this point is creating a Flash animation, only because we have medium shots and wide shots where we have actors sitting at the computer, you know, sitting in front of a workstation, and they need to walk through the animation and get the right, you know, get through the right detail on the screen. And the added effort of actually trying to teach them the correct commands and relying on that, or standing off to the side with a wireless keyboard and running it myself while they're kind of faking it, it doesn't make as much sense as putting them in front of an interactive animation where they can just freely type and the right content will show up on the screen and we can easily reset it and go for take two immediately after. My hope is in future seasons, as I grow this team, that we can delve into that more and show that in a more realistic light, mainly because recreating these things in Flash, there's so much room for error, and typos and just weird behavior that I spend so many hours with Adam Brustein, our amazing animator. We go back and forth just really finessing these animations. I would love to do it for real, but that takes, I have to convince our producers, and I have to convince the studio that it's worth it to them to bring on a bigger team to really manage that. Because when you're on set and the crew is like trying to make their day and they're behind, no one's thinking about the tech. No one. The only person on set thinking about the tech is me, which sucks.
The short answer is, as a society, we will never get rid of Flash. It will survive the apocalypse like Twinkies and cockroaches.
Like cockroaches.
Flash will never go away.
The other thing to think about is, in terms of the accuracy of what you see on screen, you couldn't do that with a Python script. Because if you had a script that just spewed out the things that are supposed to come up on a hack, that's not really the hack. That's a very artificial simulation of what's supposed to come up. What they're doing is they're creating an animation based on the intelligence they get from technical experts. In cases where I've put stuff together, we've done the hack, demoed it, filmed it, sent it to them. They've looked at that, and then they made their animation. So that animation is an accurate recreation of the hack with the right timings, the right output. So it's really as accurate as you can get without doing it. I would say their only two options are do it or do what they're doing now. And what they're doing now is pretty good, although it seems it's pretty effort heavy for Core and the others. I'd love to see them do it for real, but the reality is I've been hacking for, 25, 26 years of my life. I'm probably way better than any actor, and I find it hard to do that. Many of the hacks that I filmed and made and sent over, I had to do 4 or 5 times to get it right, to work out bugs, to do it. That's a hell of an effort for a production crew to have to take on.
And even after the fact, when I'm like, after they send me that material, I'll go back and forth with them because maybe we're working in a different distro, or maybe we're in a different. I don't know. I want to nail what the prompt looks like under these circumstances. So I'll ask these follow-up questions of if my goal is to replace IP addresses with Easter eggs or host names, stuff like that. So it's this constant dialogue I have with this team about the hacks that they're creating and how to successfully recreate them for the show.
Thanks. Thank you. Next
I have
question.
I have one question though for Core, or I guess the team, and it's around the timeline. And so my last article at Playboy, I noticed that you had a character, they walked by and they had a rest in peace, American economy with the date. And so I'm trying to figure out, well, how many months has it been since the hack? So what version of the software are we at? Like what Android versions are we using or whatever. So unless the show is progressing at current day rate, you're going to be in a situation where you've got to use like older and older distros to be time period accurate. So that is a whole nother level of nightmare.
Fortunately, the government will never be using the most up-to-date anything. So,
Hey, the government is off XP. Hey, no more XP.
No, but to Jeff's point, the season 2 starts 30 days after the end of season 1, and the big Evil Corp hack took place on 5/9/2015. So, of all the pieces of software that I clear, I need to find the version that was out in May of 2015, which is kind of tough. And it's going to make our jobs harder and harder as each season progresses because we're treating that timeline in real time, and we're just picking up where we leave off at each season. So it's going to get more difficult.
Next question.
Hi, so I was wondering about the season 2 trailer arc, where that idea came from and whether or not that's going to continue at all in the future.
So what he's referring to is the phone number that was in the season 2 trailer that led you somewhere, which led you somewhere else, which set you on this whole code breaking game. And we have hidden a lot of that in season 2. Every single episode of season 2, there are elements of code breaking, and anyone who's familiar with the DEF CON badge contest will get a huge kick out of just dealing with what we've hidden in season 2. So my answer to you is yes, that will continue. I don't want to give you too much information on where to find those little hints and where they are, but I know just based on monitoring the Reddit, our subreddit, and Twitter, that not all of them have been found, and more are coming.
Could you actually give a little intro to how that idea came to make that ARG happen?
I wanted to do this in season 1, and I bugged Sam and I bugged people at the studio of just using real IP. It started off with just I wanted to use real IP addresses and real phone numbers. Huge argument. Can't use real phone numbers. Finally convinced them to let me use real IP addresses. They gave me a pattern of IP addresses for season 2 that I'm using. And then once the digital marketing team at USA caught on that our fans were this into it and screenshotting every screen, and I gave them examples of people attempting to hit these servers that we show in season 1, or complaining about our fake IP addresses that we use in season 1. So the digital marketing team, I think they kind of just, between seasons 1 and 2, were convinced that this was worth their time and effort. So now I'm working very closely with them to build out this kind of interaction. And it's a goal of mine. In season 2, if you see an IP address or you see a URL, it will lead somewhere. I can tell you that much.
When I first started working with Cora in the first sequence that I helped out with, I had done an on-screen mock-up, and then I did a copy-paste of the terminal text to make it easier for the animators. And I used, because it was all in VMs, I was using RFC 1918 addresses so that my simulation could have hosts talk to each other, but the situation required routable addresses. So I just, in the copy-paste, made up an IP off the top of my head and stuck that in there. And I sent an email to Cora, and then I was like, I wonder who owns that IP block. So I go into a who is on it, and it's DoD IP space. So I emailed him immediately after. I was like, hey, you guys are probably going to change the addresses, but just in case, don't use that address, because I pulled it out of my ass, but it turns out I don't want someone seeing the show and then trying to hit that address. So.
Go ahead.
With that being said, to this gentleman to my left who made a comment about CSI Cyber and the digital marketing. So on Monday, I'm going to redirect CSICyber.com to Mr. Robot, because I control CSICyber.com, and they took my idea in 2008, and I'm pissed at them. CBS and Paramount now are going to have to say tough shit, because I'm going to forward that to push the show. And when people go to CSICyber.com, it's going to Mr. Robot come Monday. Google it. Check it out.
Okay, so you've already touched upon the dealing with the legal team a lot, but I was just wondering, what kind of stuff have they rejected that you wanted to do, and what the negotiation process is kind of like?
Unfortunately, I can't go into detail about what they rejected without naming some of the companies that were involved in those talks. But I know that it starts off with me presenting my best case scenario. So here's my top 3 choices of tools to use for this specific hack. And we're already working to do that. And sometimes if something doesn't clear, I'll go back to these guys and be like, what other tools can we use that we can get away with? And so our clearance coordinator will talk to our legal department, and they'll assess the risk and figure out, is it worth it to approach this company, or is it worth it to just kind of stay away and do our own thing and make up a fake name or make up a fake design, which is 100% of the time what they want me to do. And so that's a huge point of contention, and I'll go back and forth with our clearance department or our legal department about that. And I understand it. I understand that that's their job, and that's great. So it speaks to, it's hard for me to reach out. And I did have these talks with these guys, and luckily Mark knows some of these guys. So I asked him. I remember asking him when I can't tell you what tool it is, but there's a tool that shows up in episode 9 of this season where I asked him, are these guys fans of the show? Are these guys are hackers, right? They dig the show. They'd be cool if we reached out to them and asked them to sign a clearance. And he was like, yeah, of course. So against what the legal department wanted to do, we took that route, and luckily it made it into the show. I can't say what it is yet, but it's great. It's awesome. So it's hopefully it's something that will get easier. And like I said before, if you guys reach out to me, it makes my job a lot easier, and I think we can see a lot more in the show if you guys just make first contact.
Cool.
Hi guys, big fan of the show. Thanks for making it happen. My question is, I really like the scene with the Faraday cage, and I'm wondering if you have any plans for other consumer products or anything that helps protect mobile privacy and security.
Can you say the last part of that question one more time?
Anything in the works to help protect mobile privacy and security from either like a hard good or software good?
Yes.
I thought you were going to talk about the Faraday cage that White Rose was
It's
in.
one of those things that if you go into it, then we sort of expose things, right? I mean, it's not. I remember talking to Core about this because at one point we were in a conversation where he did say, "Well, we already reused the Faraday cage once. We can't do it again." So as we have more ideas, because I have a couple in my head, I don't really want to tell you because I want you to sort of see it in season 3.
It's probably fair to say there's stuff that's going to come up. The thing that drives it, though, is the story. We are kind of slaves to the story. We're trying to find technology that fits into the story. And the main thing I want to see with the tech that I put into it is, so if you put the wrong tech in, it can be really jarring. You know, you're watching this great story, you're getting immersed into it, and then someone does something fundamentally stupid. And you look at it and you're like, oh. And suddenly you're out of the story and it's really not that interesting anymore. So what we do has to fit in nicely. Any opportunity for something that's come up, we'll look at it and we'll try and use it because we want it to be realistic. And at the same time, we want to use it to send a message. And the best way to do that is to use cool things.
Yeah, and I think you're doing a great job. I guess it was kind of a leading question because taking a repeated idea of a standalone Faraday cage and making it more mobile is what I'm holding in my hand right here. So I want you guys to use it. It's called Silent Pocket.
Product placement.
Good shirt.
Thank you. Mind the grid. I like it. How you doing?
For those who can't see, he's wearing an Evil Corp shirt.
First of all, thank you for putting together a show about hackers that doesn't suck. Should I speak for everybody?
That's about the best compliment you'll get from us, right?
Though Sneakers is a great movie, so
Sneakers
starting
kicked ass,
out
yeah.
there
Sneakers is awesome.
And War Games.
War Games.
That was the same crew.
But those are movies, not a TV show.
That is true.
Question about the Easter eggs. They're starting to get more complicated. Like, what's the thought process around coming up with the Easter eggs? Is it you guys? Because they sort of seem to be inspired by like Cicada 3301 kind of puzzles and shit. So, is that you guys, or is it like the media team, or like who's?
So it's the media team and myself working on it primarily. Sometimes I'll check in with these guys about and just ask for advice about where it would lead.
So
I
you
know
guys shipped the hoodie that we got for solving
the American Giant hoodie.
the F Society.
Yep.
That thing is badass.
That's
Thank you.
awesome.
Yeah.
I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to ruin it, and I don't want to spoil the fun out there for everyone who's involved in it. But it is in addition to posting the show and you know getting through these cuts and trying to finalize everything. I'm still working with the digital marketing team nonstop on just the Easter eggs alone, which is a taxing effort. But it's amazing how many people are into it, and I'm so glad, and it's really satisfying. Just the online response that we're getting from it is awesome. It's more than I could have asked for, which is great. So I'm really excited about it.
Sick. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. We're talking a lot about American viewers, but what's your experience with international viewership?
From what I can gather, I know that the show is not available streaming all over, like completely internationally. So people have to cut some corners to watch it, depending on where they live. And last I checked, we were the #1 pirated show within the past month or so. Which I'm fine with. I know people at the network probably hate me saying this, but I'm fine with that. So and just the social media response we've been getting internationally from Latin America, from Europe, it's been phenomenal, and it's really satisfying to see that the show is striking a chord on a global scale like that. It's phenomenal.
Francis here. Go ahead.
Salut.
So I had a really good question, but I kind of forgot what it was. I guess
you can step aside and let the next person if you want to think about it.
I apologize for asking this one, but there's been a lot of speculation online about what Atsu is as a command. And
What? Can you say that again?
Atsu in the first season, in the beginning, he uses a command called Atsu. It just kind of looks like sudo or something like that. But is it an internal thing to Evil Core? What's the official response on that?
So the official response, and I knew I was going to get this question one day. None of us worked on the pilot.
Okay.
So the pilot had their own consultant who I don't know how present he was, and I don't know what kind of interaction he had with the animator on the pilot. From what I have heard, he just left him with a stack of code and left him to sift through it. So you have an animator who's never even worked in a Linux distro before, staring at code, and he doesn't know what it means, and he has to figure out how to animate it and recreate it for a pilot of a TV show. So Atsu is probably just a misstep. It's just and there's a lot of things like that I could point out from the pilot that even I have issues with. So luckily we were able to kind of remedy that once we got the series pickup, and I was working on episodes 2 through 10 to make sure that didn't happen.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think one of the other things you have to remember is these kinds of shows evolve. They're not static, and as they move on, there are additional dimensions that get added. Things get better. Processes change. So I think you can say reliably, this show is just going to go from strength to strength.
That sort of raises the question, Cor, you and I talked previously when I'd asked you, like, where do you envision the show going? The show is operating at many layers. And you've got the basic plot of the hacking. You've got Elliot's sort of mental deterioration and his old issues with his father and things like that. You've got the control issues and all of its permutations of hacking and things like that. Now you've introduced this whole thing with White Rose. There are a lot of sort of tangents coming, and we've seen other shows fail spectacularly when they're trying to juggle too much. Lost, for instance. Yeah. How are you guys ensuring that you guys don't get lost, essentially?
Great question. Sam and the other writers and I have a roadmap for where we want this season to go. Unlike some of the other shows that were mentioned, I have a feeling they were writing themselves into a corner because they didn't really know what the end beat was, what the conclusion of the story was. We know where we're headed, and we have certain milestones that we're trying to reach on the way. So I don't feel like we're ever going to get into that situation as long as we stay true to organically where our characters are emotionally and where the journey would take them. So as long as we're tracking Elliot and the other members of F Society emotionally and organically serving the story justice, I don't think that's going to happen. And I know some people have had some issues with the pacing of season 2 and the first couple episodes being a little slow. I've read a lot of reviews and blogs about that, and really all I can say is, like, we dropped a huge bomb at the end of season 1. We destroyed the economy. Elliot had the realization that he has delusions and he's suffering from that he's basically insane, and he needs to work that out. He needs to reconcile that, and I think him working out those issues and those inner demons and connecting it metaphorically to things that are common to the tech crowd, whether they be infinite loops of insanity or kernel panics. I think that's organically where the story needs to go, and I still find it. I think it's compelling and intriguing. So hang in there. That's all I'll say.
I'd sort of add that I think you'll start to get a bit more explanation as to the history of things as you go through. There was a lot of allusions to certain things just happening. Now let's try to figure out and help you understand why that happened and how the characters grew. And that does take time, but I will tell you this without revealing any spoilers, it gets fantastic in a few episodes, and then you'll get to the end, you're gonna be like, wow, right? Like, it's there. So just kind of like make it through some of the character development. You're gonna get to that point. You're gonna say, I did not know that. I can't tell you which episode, but it's coming soon.
Go ahead.
Thanks for taking my question. I love the show, the Raspberry Pi gag where Elliot got called out for holding one up. Like the timing on that was like, that's a Raspberry Pi, that's a Raspberry Pi. That was awesome. Thank you. My question is, with the inclusion of the scene from Hackers, who is involved in that conversation? Like, this panel shows that there's a lot of care and effort that goes into making this not give information about hacking, but that specific piece of script just calls it out. Were you part of that? Was there a discussion like, we're really calling the question here? How'd that go?
I was a part of that, and that was just our meta moment of kind of poking fun at ourselves, basically. And even though it's ridiculous, I love that movie. I grew up watching that movie. I'm sure a lot of people in here are fans of that film. And, other writers in the room are fans of it as well. And it was a fun way of kind of calling out that, there's going to be a TV show that's going to fuck it up, and, maybe we might be that show. And hopefully hopefully we're not. But at the time of writing that script, it was a cool little joke that we wanted to incorporate, and I think the community loved it and embraced it, because I have a feeling that everyone in this room has probably bashed Hackers at one point or another, and it's a fun scene.
I, for one, would love to see F Society on rollerblades going to New York.
Thank you.
That's why I own rollerblades. So I love your show. Had to write it down.
Closer to the
what I was
mic.
gonna say. Sorry. Oh, I love your show, and thank you again for teaching our parents what we do. So as a woman who codes, you mentioned that there was a favorite hack that was fails. So I was just any thought to maybe giving an unsuspecting female the role that's like kind of on the same level as Elliot?
Well, I think season 2, we made an effort to really flesh out the rest of our cast. And I know that season 1 is more of Elliot's journey in figuring out what is happening. Season 2 is more about dealing with the consequences and repercussions of what happened. And it gives us an opportunity for them to deal with it. And I think if you've seen enough of season 2 at this point to know that we're spending a lot more time with our female hacker characters and our female cybercrime character. And it's a hope of mine that we continue to do that, and just keep watching for season 2. It's something that we are definitely moving forward. So thank you.
I will say this though. I look in the room and it's refreshing as well to see the diversity, because it's not there all the time in the C-suite of the conversations that we have about this. And so as the community is growing and learning, to find people that look like me or look like her that are in the room is just, very awesome.
Yeah, it's funny, Core, we had actually talked about this, the diversity on the show, and how it was very intentional in terms of ethnicities and everything.
It was by design. We wanted to make sure we had badass female hackers a part of F Society. We wanted to have an Iranian hacker. We wanted Romero to be, the old school freaker that joined the group, and Mobley is of Indian descent. So we're definitely, it was definitely by design, and we definitely our hope is that it does inspire that kind of diversity that Andre is talking about. Definitely.
The thing is, when you look out at the DEF CON audience, you realize that the hacker community is that diverse, which is why it's really great to see a show that actually represents what we look like.
So we've got just 5 minutes more. Let's take a few more questions.
So I always have a lot of empathy for the thief, the perpetrator, or the...
We can't hear you. Talk up close.
I always have a lot of empathy for the victim and the perpetrator, but have you ever thought about having a backstory for Philip Price? I realize their target story is the 99%, but more important question is, have you thought about the kids workshops that we have here, that only through our children we will conquer?
Actually, Mark and I were just talking about the kids' workshops, and I think a couple of us are probably going to do a talk at one of those, either tomorrow or tomorrow afternoon. To answer your Philip Price question, yes. We've thought about the backstory, and if you keep watching, you'll get some more of that.
Go ahead. Next question.
I just wanted a decent photo. No, I'm just kidding. My question has to do with personal security. So obviously, season 1, Elliot's hacking social media sites, emails for his coworkers or whatever. I understand people with simple passwords aren't going to be doing two-factor authentication or anything of that nature. However, not most services, there are services, Gmail, Facebook. If you log in from another system, it's going to send you an email that notifies you. Granted, if he has access to those other emails, it's null and void. Yeah. But he'd have to be doing a lot at one point in time. He's just one guy. Was there ever a conversation about that in the tech world? And if so, what was the reasoning behind not including login notifications?
It's a question of time. It's always a matter of time and how much real estate we have on the page and how much time we have in the cut to devote to a hack. And even the steps that we want to show, we can't always show them all. They always get cut down in the editing process. So it is a conversation we've had, and it's just us making the decision of like, what are the important beats we need to see to convey the story about this hack and how he's compromising this account. But to your point, if I can get that level of detail into the show, that's my goal. I think that's all of our goals, to get as much detail as possible into those sequences.
Thank you.
We have time for both of these questions, though. Right? Okay, go ahead.
So first of all, I'm really big fan of the show. My friends and I just love it. My question is, so you mentioned that like you get feedback from Sam when you get something wrong, like there's a typo or somebody points out that like a screen is wrong or the command doesn't work right. But have you gotten any feedback about sort of the show being used to teach? I had an opportunity at my job to introduce some colleagues of mine who are not part of this field to my field, which is forensics. And I said, if you want to know what hacking is, who hackers are, please go watch the show. And I had people nodding, and people have come back to me, one or two have come back and said, oh my God, I've watched the show, it's amazing, and I'm frightened. So my question is, have you heard about whether it's somebody in the C-suite or a teacher or just a person saying, I was inspired by your show? Have you gotten the feedback about the show being used for good, I guess?
100%. You have a story you want to tell about this?
I was in meetings all week for work, and I don't think a single person, be they engineer, or practitioner, or at the executive level, hasn't gotten that out of the show and enjoys the increased awareness, enjoys the fact that it caused them to think about an attack technique or an attack vector that maybe wouldn't have come first to mind otherwise. So I definitely think that's one of the ways that it can be a force for good and a force for educating.
And one of the best compliments I've ever received, and I've received it on numerous occasions, is people will come to me and say, I don't usually watch television. Like I don't binge watch anything. I don't watch TV, but I watch Mr. Robot because of the hacks that you guys portray and how scared it makes me about my using my devices. So it's amazing.
I would say you actually have the leader of the free world as your fan of Mr. Robot. It was actually very interesting because I was on set and Sam was super excited and he's like, the president loves our show. And he's like, got contacted by his personal aide and said, actually, I don't even know if I should be saying it, but I think it's important because he said, you binge watched the show and loves Mr. Robot and wanted to see season 2. And it's like, that is the levels that we're getting, right? I mean, that's exactly what we're looking for because then it's just a trickle down, right? I mean, if we can get it there, then we're getting others in government and we're getting others in the C-suite and it's that conversation that I'm hoping that we get, right?
And my hope is that's the reason he's interested in the show, and it's not because we impersonated him in the first episode of season 2, and he just wants to see what's up and what we're doing. So, definitely, I think that's great. Thank you.
I also don't know when he binge watched Mr. Robot. I don't know where he has time, the president. But.
Air Force One.
Ah, touche. He has a plane.
Okay, so my question is, as far as getting this onto a network channel, from the network's perspective, was it, here's a hacking show and they're saying something about maybe it's technically accurate, or was the technically accurate part something that they actually cared about?
the technically accurate part was something that Sam cared about. I'm not sure that the network was that invested in it at that point. They just saw a great script written by an auteur filmmaker like Sam, and they wanted to pursue that project. I think once the pilot came out and Sam was able to deliver that level of authenticity, it set the bar and the expectation, and you have network executives reading, these articles published by tech journalists talking about the technology on the show. So I think it was something that was always on Sam's radar that he wanted to pull off. And luckily, when I met him, we were completely in line about that. And, to his credit, he just kind of empowered me and let me fight with whoever I had to fight with to get that level of detail into the show. And obviously, the fact that I was able to grow the team for season 2 speaks to the point that the network and the studio are supportive of that effort, which is great.
Great. Okay. Oh, go ahead. I think we're out of time. So just join me in thanking the panelists, first of all, for a great show and their participation today.